Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And good Friday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local forecast and warning information from the National Weather Service. You can do that easily by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. Give us a call on the weather info line at 800-472-0391, and you can find more weather forecast information there. Facebook, NWS Alaska is the place to go. If you visited us earlier this morning, you would have seen information about the record highs set around Fairbanks from yesterday. Another warm day there surely today. And for Twitter, NWS Alaska, NWS Fairbanks, NWS Anchorage, and NWS Juneau, all places to find weather information all day long using the hashtag AKwx. And on YouTube, you get your daily afternoon map briefing. If you search AKwx TV a little bit after this show, you will find the compendium of Alaska weather as it exists on the internets. And of course, you can go back and watch this show if you missed a piece that you want to watch, or maybe you thought you heard something, you want to check it just again. Get the marine forecast a little bit later on in the evening. You can certainly do that as well. Again, that's on YouTube, as well as the daily afternoon map briefing around 4 o'clock from the NWS Anchorage account. Now, on this day, March 27th of 1964, not the best of days for Alaska history, but so many things have happened since then. You'll recall this is the day of the Great Alaska Earthquake, the tsunami damage that resulted there in Kodiak. If you've ever been through Kodiak or are in Kodiak, you know where those memorials are. The tsunami damage at Seward Point there, the Prince William Sound region, hit extraordinarily hard. The quake itself, of course, one of the biggest, if not the biggest in North American history, most powerful in U.S. history. At 5:36 local time on the 27th, the magnitude 9.2 earthquake occurred inside Prince William Sound. It was the second most powerful earthquake ever recorded in history. And the tsunamis generated from that affected much of south central Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California, Hawaii, and was recorded as far away as Japan. Well, if you look at the map here, what you're seeing on the left-hand side of your screen is the energy leaving Prince William Sound and stretching all the way down the west coast into South America, and also all the way out toward Japan. Well, a similar thing happened with the Honshu earthquake across Japan around 2011. That energy traveled all the way across the Pacific and southward, of course. So we know that tsunami threats are major and important threats to keep track of here in Alaska, and that's why we tested the tsunami and the emergency alert system around coastal Alaska earlier this week. And hopefully you participated in that. Hopefully you have a way to receive important broadcast and emergency information. If you don't, one of the easiest and most secure ways that you can do that is by purchasing a NOAA weather radio, getting that configured. Your local National Weather Service office should be able to help you with that and answer questions, as well as many other members of your emergency community. That will provide you with local and timely information from the emergency alert system there, including weather warnings and including tsunami warnings as it applies to your location in Alaska. Now, on with the show, as the Muppets would say. Let's take a look out to the west, and you can see that offshore flow still continuing across south and western Alaska. As a low-pressure system starts to work back across Bristol Bay, we're still dragging in that colder and drier air across the YK Delta and bringing colder air down across the Bering Sea. In the meantime, a lot of very dry weather across the North Pacific. Not a whole lot going on right there. The main activity for most of Alaska is over here in the Gulf of Alaska, and this is just stirring the pot, stirring it up, and sending waves of storm energy a little bit further to the west every time. In the meantime, though, there is a little bit of a fly in the ointment. The pattern does seem to be changing a little bit in the upper levels. We're getting waves of low pressure that are starting to build up a little bit to the west and pushing their way a little bit further to the east. Well, that means things in the west coast of North America and the United States are changing enough so that we might see the pattern shift a little bit for Alaska. So if we kind of unclog the dam and the gum of the works there across the west coast, then things might move a little bit here in Alaska. So in the next week, week and a half or so, we might start to see some changes. What we do know is that right now most of the Gulf of Alaska has had pretty dry weather, but you can see the next wave clearly moving northward. Another wave of low pressure here spinning up across areas just south of Kodiak Island and well to the south and west of southeastern Alaska. A lot of what you're seeing here across south central has been cloud cover, but not a whole lot of precipitation from it today. Some of that was falling around Prince William Sound across southwestern Alaska into Bristol Bay. Here's that other area of low pressure here, and then we get back into the northerly flow. One thing you can pick out here looks to be contrails. If you see these little wavy lines here, we know there's ice pack here, so these wouldn't be ship tracks just south of St. Matthew and north of St. Paul. The leading edge of the ice is within about 20 nautical miles of St. Paul at this point, and we'll talk about the sea ice edge in just a little bit. So the best guess would be that these are contrails showing up as warm clouds over colder ice flow. Now watch as that moves a little bit one more time. You can keep an eye on some of these lines there. So if airlines are flying from east to west or from west to east across the Bering Sea, that warmer exhaust over the colder terrain would show up as a cloud in the satellite image. Interesting stuff there. Now, yesterday we were talking about the jet stream blowing in from a west and southwesterly direction and heading up over the Brooks Range and over the middle Yukon Valley in the upper Koyukuk and Noatak valleys there. Probably produce some snow, and that's exactly what we're looking at again as we head into tonight and tomorrow. Kind of a band of precipitation here. In fact, it might even be warm enough tonight that some of that could fall as rain. In the meantime, the cloud cover you see across the Gulf will start to scoot a little bit further to the east, and once again putting southeast in prime position for a better opportunity of rainfall. Today, not so much. There were some pockets of heavier rainfall. I had a report of heavy rain around Sitka earlier this afternoon. Probably nothing you're unaccustomed to, of course. Pockets of rainfall around the Gulf, not as widespread as it seemed to be in the last couple days. And then here's our trough of low pressure extending all the way up the Yukon Valley into places like Arctic Village, and that's going to focus more and more cloud cover there. Didn't see a whole lot of reports of snowfall in this region during the afternoon, but again, that could change pretty quickly into the evening hours. That may be widely scattered periods of rain and snow, but there may be an opportunity for it to be warm enough just for a while this evening that you could get rain before it becomes all snow once again. As we look out across the Gulf, low pressure is down to 974 millibars. That's going to keep pushing that front northward into the northern and eastern Gulf Coast communities, bringing a chance of rain mainly to the outer coastline for southeast initially tonight, then that will expand in coverage a little bit more tomorrow. Some periods of rain and snow still possible in south central and Prince William Sound, but really most of it's going to be Prince William Sound and most of it's going to be rainfall. For the Alaska Peninsula, you may see that mix in with some rain and snow. As you get out into the colder air, a better chance for that mix around Adak and Atka. Probably snow for the Pribilovs. Looking northward, things still stay dry around Kotzebue Sound heading into Saturday. A trough of low pressure moving from east to west is going to encourage a little bit better chance of snow across the northern Brooks Range and probably across the Alcan border northward toward Kaktovik. Low pressure is down to 977 millibars now. The triple point part of this weather front is working forward. And as that moves northward a little bit more, you'll have a better chance of getting some heavier rainfall around Ketchikan and Annette. The drier part of the system now working northward toward Kodiak Island and Prince William Sound, and you can see another batch of rainfall behind that. Out across the west coast, periods of rain and snow showers should be expected there. Really nothing more than what you've already seen the last several days. Periods of rain showers across the Alaska Peninsula, the eastern chain, and then we have a new weather player out in the west, 999 millibar low that's working its way east and north. That occlusion will continue tracking eastward, but it falls apart pretty quickly by Sunday afternoon. Pockets of rain and snow showers there from Kiska out to Attu and the Curls. Out across the Kodiak Island region, 985 millibar low now is what we're dealing with, and waves of low pressure traveling around it as we show in black dashed lines, but the occluded front is actually gone at this point. Light rainfall continuing across the north and eastern Gulf Coast, including Prince William Sound and Seward, of course. And then when you get into the Cook Inlet region, most things are drying up. More clouds than anything else. Pockets of rain and snow showers across the Susitna Valley and generally northward and east into the Talkeetnas. Otherwise dry conditions for the Copper River Basin and some light snow possible for the north slope, including Barrow, Atkasuk, out toward Prudhoe Bay, and Dead Horse. The west coast looks primarily dry heading through Sunday. So here's your temperatures today. We talked about mild conditions for southeast, and indeed it's so. For 40s and 50s we go for southeastern Alaska. Hyder up to 54 today. Down around Haida Gwaii, 40s and 50s for you today. 41 with rainfall in Sitka. Juneau was looking at mid-40s by late afternoon. 43 in Yakutat, 30s and 40s for Prince William Sound. Why? Because it was raining for a large part of the day in many communities. 48 in Anchorage, 45 in Homer and Seward was 41. 47 for Kenai. Around the Susitna Valley, mid-40s for many today. Healy was showing 43, Fort Greely 45, 46, and mild in Fairbanks. So it doesn't look like it was as mild as yesterday. 34 as we got into Fort Yukon, 35 around Bettles, 23 for Arctic Village, and AKwx Pass was showing 10. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse closer to 0 today. Barrow 3 below. Point Lay was 17 below. Many around the Kotzebue Sound region from 5 to 10 below, with Nome at 13. Unalakleet had 18 this afternoon. Galena was 23. McGrath up to 44. And once you move southward from that through the Kuskokwim Valley and into Bristol Bay, temperatures were considerably warmer there. Lower to mid 40s for many, 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, lower 40s for Kodiak Island, upper 20s for the Pribilofs, and the central and western chain were in the mid 30s. As we look at overnight low temperatures, expect many to be in the teens and 20s for the interior and southwest, in the 30s, 38 in Kodiak Island, mid-30s for the chain and the Alaska Peninsula, 30s and 40s for southeast. Anywhere from 5 to 15 below, though, for the northwest coast, 8 below in Barrow, 5 above in Nome and Fairbanks. You're looking at 18. High temperatures tomorrow should make it back into the mid to upper 40s, south central and the lower 40s, 45 in Kodiak, mid 40s for southeast, closer to 50 as you get down toward Ketchikan, Craig, and Klawock. The Alaska Peninsula in the lower 40s, mid to upper 30s for the central chain, 27 in St. Paul, and Nome looking at 22 with Bethel at 41. Flying weather then shows IFR conditions across the Brooks Range and the North Slope. Watch for IFR to develop across the lower and middle Yukon Valley, but most areas south of that should be pretty dry. VFR conditions are expected there. Watch for IFR across the Chilkoot and White Range for a period tomorrow, and VFR for many locations in southeast, the North and Western Gulf, and Kodiak Island. And most of the Bering Sea will see a little bit of a reprieve, with MVFR conditions transitioning to VFR for the central and western chain. Here's a look at what we expect for your pass conditions. And AKwx Pass and Adigan Pass should both see some improvements toward MVFR as we go through your day on Saturday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will likely hold at IFR conditions through most of the day, with improvements noted in Rainy Pass during your day, transitioning toward VFR. Windy Pass we expect to start at instrument flight rule through the day, with some improvements in ceiling and visibility as we go. Isabel Pass might lean all the way over toward VFR conditions for your Saturday. Mentasta Pass is also looking better. Tanita Pass we're going to call MVFR for your Saturday to start the weekend. At Portage Pass, likely IFR conditions there all the way through. And Chilkoot and White Pass we expect to see IFR conditions again through Saturday. Freezing levels show that north wind is pushing that 0 degree line further and further southward toward Adak and Atka. Still holding close to Bristol Bay and rounding the curve into the intercoastal waterways there for southeastern Alaska, with warmer air aloft limiting itself to mainly the eastern sections of the Gulf of Alaska. Icing potential is going to be below 10,000 feet and fairly light for the north and eastern sections of the Brooks Range. Most of southeastern Alaska will at least have a hint or a taste of some light icing potential. That's going to be below 6,000 feet. The Cook Inlet region and the Kenai Peninsula, as well as parts of the Barren Islands and southward toward Kodiak Island, below 6,000 feet. And areas around the Alaska Peninsula out toward the central and eastern Aleutians, below 4, even 5,000 feet will be possible. The jet stream shows low pressure sitting across southwestern Alaska and the North Pacific. That strong flow from the north and west is still taking a dive south of Alaska, and that's focusing that surface weather here across the Gulf. But if this shifts just a little bit more over the coming days, the ridge of high pressure across the west seems to be on the move. And if that is the case, then this may move a little bit further east, and that would put us into more of a northerly flow across more parts of western and southwestern Alaska, which could change the weather picture dramatically. So maybe winter is not over just yet. Just hold your horses and we'll see how this plays out. But it is interesting to know. Here's a look at 9,000 feet and low pressure sitting south of Kodiak Island. Shows that south and westerly flow, bringing that active weather again to the north and eastern sections of the Gulf. We get kind of the leftovers sloshing over into southwestern Alaska, and then mainly dry conditions across the interior. With wind speeds there around 10 to 20 knots or so from the south and west, we still see a pretty clear sign of a ridge of high pressure across North America and the west coast. Out across the west, winds are light across the interior, or the middle of Bering Sea, and more of a westerly flow just south of the chain from 30 to 50 knots. At 3,000 feet, here's our general circulation across the central and western sections of the Gulf. An east and northeasterly wind moving across southwestern Alaska between 10 and 30 knots. And then a little bit of a stronger flow from the south, 30 to 40 knots there, coming into southeastern Alaska. It really picks up around Sitka and Juneau at 55 knots. And more of a north and easterly flow coming across the north slope, 20 to as high as 25 knots, generally again from the north and east. Winds slow down a little bit further west. and you get a northerly flow still cutting through the central and eastern Aleutians, running around 30 to 35 knots. So turbulence potential looks to be the greatest across southeastern Alaska tomorrow, below 4,000 feet. Couple that with marginal visibility and ceilings there, and it's kind of a so-so day to fly. Below 4,000 feet again with occasional turbulence possible there. And for south central, below 6,000 feet, especially along Cook Inlet, we'll say light chop around Prince William Sound as usual, and around Seward and northward toward Wasilla and eastern areas, maybe as far north as Birchwood too. Out across the central and eastern sections of the chain below 4,000 feet, we would not be surprised to see some light chop there as we go into the weekend. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a sea ice update, and a look at the Pribilofs especially, and of course the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. On behalf of Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening, we are honored to have Roger Motzko back on the show. Roger is the Technical Services Manager in the Air Traffic Organization's Safety and Technical Training Unit with the Federal Aviation Administration. Mr. Motzko, welcome back to Hangar Flying.
Thanks, Mary. I appreciate being here.
The Federal Aviation Administration's Air Traffic Organization has a top 5 that the agency focuses on every year. Can you tell us what the top 5 is, and how does the FAA determine what it is and what needs improving?
So, Mary, we look at risk analysis every single day, every moment of every day. And we've got a comprehensive electronic data analysis and reporting system. And so when something goes not as well as we would like it to, or someone sees something that maybe should be fixed in the system, they'll type in that information. So there's over 7,000 pieces of that information collected every single week through various reports. Our quality assurance group then looks at it every single morning, and then they filter through that and they look for additional information in order to better describe the problems, and then that comes up. And of course, once a year, we culminate and we try to focus on those things that we could best do in order to improve the aviation system. And so, of course, we're looking at those that happen very regularly or those that have great consequence. So we use the NTSB reports, accident reports and incident reports. We use the Aviation Airborne Safety Reporting System. We use a surface risk reporting system. And of course, we use our own internal investigation system to identify those things which create the greatest risk in the system. So we try to come up with just 5 each year so that we can focus on them.
That's a lot of filtering down to just 5 issues, because it sounds like you're looking at everything from air traffic control interactions with pilots to ground to pilot individual flight decisions which may be made, or mistakes that may be made, and taking all that information and filtering it down to just 5.
So those 5 are pretty comprehensive. For example, this year, our number 1 is weather dissemination. So if you look at weather dissemination, why is that important? Well, getting PIREPs from pilots, critical. And of course, we're all guilty of probably not giving weather when we could have, because we're either too busy or we don't understand the format. So a big push is to, number 1, help pilots remember to give that information, and 2, then to pass it back out again so that pilots are best advised of their weather situation, current weather situation. The second in that is surface memory aids. So as we taxi along the ground, we think that air traffic control knows exactly who we are by first name, of course, and they can see the 2-inch letters that are on the tail number. And of course, that's not true, but they track us both mentally, spatially, and then they track us by blocks of information that they have in the tower cab. Well, they also have surface memory aids to remind them that maybe a particular surface is closed or where you need to stop, that the runway is occupied. And so you're helping as a pilot in communicating to air traffic your location, your exact location, correct location, and who you are, helps to remind them of those surface memory aids and when to use them and when to remove them. And so that's a big thing in preventing runway incursions, of course.
Sure.
And then third is VFR separation. So we've all been in the pattern when they say you're number 5 behind the blue and white Cessna. And of course, knowing where you are in that system is particularly important, creating separation. And so air traffic controllers trying to visually determine where you are, who you are, Again, pretty difficult to read your end number as you're flying along in the pattern, but able to observe that separation and then use the technology that they're afforded in the towers these days. Not a lot of it, maybe just enough. And then we're asking controllers to both look at a 2D dimensional display, then look back out into the 3D world and reacquire you. It's a lot of work. And so providing that separation is one of the things that we're working on in training, both training systems and helping controllers to understand. And of course, we do that with our forensic animations. Fourth in that system is giving you an adequate vector. So once a pilot gets launched, of course, what do we want? We want a heading and an altitude. And if we have a heading and an altitude, we feel pretty safe. And so we're working with air traffic controllers to maybe better understand, and it would help if pilots would communicate when maybe I'm not sure of my assigned vector, or maybe I haven't heard from you in a little while and I really wish that I would, particularly in the terminal environment. And so pipe up and say that, identify yourself and what it is that we need so we can provide those vectors. The last one, of course, is judgment, and that's pretty difficult to add without experience. And so the shared judgment that you do in your safety seminars where air traffic controllers get together along with pilots and are able to discuss those things that are common to each other, vitally important. So education adds to judgment, and you, of course, provide that in the fall and spring safety seminar. So we hope to see everyone there.
Well, we hope to have you there as well. Thank you for being our guest. It's been a real pleasure and honor to have you on the show. I can see where some of these things that are nationwide problems are particularly important for Alaska. So absolutely, we will be working on that in our seminar.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope this helps highlight some of the people that work behind the scenes to make aviation safer in Alaska. We thank the FAA and their support of the Foundation in their efforts to improve safety. Until next time, fly safely.
Thanks, Mary. See you next week. Here's today's sea ice edge, and like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, the distance from the main ice pack, not counting the ice strips out ahead of it, is about 20 nautical miles north and west of St. Paul. And with the northerly winds coming across the Bering, that main ice pack has dropped a little bit further south. However, good news if you're in St. Paul and you don't want ice. The latest sea ice outlook today shows that sea ice is not expected to reach St. Paul. And you're saying, well, it's pretty close and there's a north wind. But the temperatures around the sea surface temperatures there are just a scant too warm, and as a lot of those strips are moving southward, they're melting pretty quick. So right now our sea ice experts don't think that main ice pack is going to make it to St. Paul. And last I checked, the main forecast for the sea ice is not to reach St. Paul at any time this year. So we will see. Weather.gov/Anchorage/ice.php is the place to go, of course, for the latest outlook information. Here's the big picture. We still have some small concentrations in the northern Cook Inlet as well, and then all the way out towards St. Matthew, St. Lawrence Island, of course, and north of the Kuskokwim Bay there. And again, this distance only about 20 nautical miles, so pretty close, but again, that northerly wind still in charge. Here's a look at southeasterlies flow, and you'll look at southeasterlies marine forecast and northerlies. That's what I'm trying to say. Northerlies coming out of the Lynn Canal at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, 20 to 30 knots across the inner waterways with 4 to 6 foot seas. There's winds coming up to 30 knots and 35-knot winds all the way up the coast. A little bit more of an easterly flow south of Yakutat to Cross Sound on Saturday, becoming more southerly on Sunday, still holding around 25 to 30 knots, 20 to 25-knot winds on the inside with 4 to 5 foot seas there, and seas as high as 13 feet from Cross Sound to about Sitka and Port Alexander. As we look at Prince William Sound, 25-knot winds there from the east on Saturday, and north and easterly wind coming down Cook Inlet, 25 to 35 knots up to 40 knots west of the Barrens, and certainly some gales east of the Barrens up to 45 knots there with a 15-foot sea there. So again, a little bit of a stronger flow. Easterlies east of Kodiak Island at 35 knots, 40 knots also in Shelikof Strait with a 12-foot sea. That diminishes greatly by Sunday. Much better conditions there. Northerly flow at 15 knots, and north and easterly winds still coming down Cook Inlet between 15 and 25 knots. Easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, and south and easterly flow for the north and western Gulf between 25 and 30 knots there on Sunday. Now for the Alaska Peninsula, a broad northeasterly flow there from about 20 to 25 knots in all areas, 11 to 12 foot seas in the Pacific and 4 to 7 foot seas on the Bering side. That flow kind of reverses a little bit more and gets pulled into low pressure here east of Kodiak Island for Sunday. Northerlies inside of Bristol Bay with a 4 foot sea, and westerlies coming off the peninsula with 11 to 12 foot seas on a 15 knot wind. For the Aleutians, north and westerly winds are still in charge for Saturday. Northerlies coming into the Unalaska and Dutch Harbor region with a 10 foot sea. Southerlies in charge out in the west, 25 knots with a 7 foot sea, 9 to 14 foot seas on the Pacific side. As we get into Sunday, seas and winds diminish in just a little bit. More of a north and westerly flow continues for the central and eastern islands, with a westerly flow kicking in for the central and western chain around 20 to 25 knots, 6 to as high as 10 foot seas out in the west, that around Attu and Shemya. For the west coast, northerly winds obviously still moving that medium thickness ice pack further and further south. Freezing spray there south of the ice edge. We should really put this down here, right? Looks like more of a north and easterly flow in Kuskokwim Bay, a 25 knot wind with a 4 foot sea. And then as we get into Sunday, northerlies there with 25 knots, 2 foot seas in the Kuskokwim Bay area, 7 foot seas around St. Paul and St. George on that northerly flow. And for the north coast, Arctic coast, look for an east and northeasterly flow around 10 to 15 knots, north and easterly winds outside of Kotzebue Sound and west of Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. By Sunday, the winds are picking up a little bit more on the Beaufort Seacoast, 20 to 25 knots, northeasterlies there off of the Chukchi Seacoast, and northerlies outside of Kotzebue Sound at 25 knots. That is a look at your marine weather heading through the weekend. Now a recap of tonight's weather for southeast. A frontal boundary is working a little bit closer to home. That means an improving or worsening chance for rainfall as we get into the tonight and tomorrow periods there for Saturday and Sunday, especially for the outer coast. As we get into Prince William Sound, a continued threat for some light rain. Otherwise, hit and miss snow showers mixed with rain at times the further south and west you go. And there is a pocket of some warmer air here north of the Yukon Valley as you head into the Noatak and Kobuk valleys. Might see some light rain early this evening. That'll probably change over to snow as we head into early tomorrow. Light snow possible for the North Slope as we get into Saturday. Rainfall for Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and Kodiak Island and the peninsula, with rain continues for southeast with low pressure sitting at 977 millibars. Most places in the interior looking at more clouds than anything else. And for Sunday, well, more of the same. Light rain for southeast and parts of Prince William Sound and dry conditions for the interior. Have a great weekend.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.